Hello, and welcome to my EDC 250 Learning Disabilities Services screencast. First, we will discuss Child Find and the Student Study Team. Before communicating the need for a student study team with a parent, you will need to build all relationships with caregivers and parents. When communicating with parents, you will need to be factual, discuss the student's strengths and weaknesses, both at school and at home, and discuss other improvement options, such as study plans for outside of school. Parental preparation. When you prepare a parent for the SST, you will need to help the parent become actively involved, which can be helpful by using the parental preparation sheet. The parental preparation sheet goes over the strengths and weaknesses of a child, the interests of the child, and the objectives and goals that a parent has for their child. Parental reactions. Parental reactions can vary greatly from one person to another. They can be from shock to straight acceptance off the bat, or they can be things such as depression, anger, or guilt. The SST process and summary sheet. The student study team process includes gathering data, planning resources, monitoring progress, building trust with caregivers, and making referrals to formal testing. The summary sheet summarizes everything that goes on in the SST process. The summary sheet includes strengths and weaknesses, information and modifications if it's so needed, concerns and questions that parents, caregivers, and other educators may ask, strategies and actions, and responsibility, which may fall on the parent, student, or the teacher. Accommodations and the student study team. The student study team helps to find resources to help in the general ed setting. This helps to avoid the need for a special education setting and provides the least restrictive environment for a student. There's a wide variety of strategies that can be used for accommodations, and they can be simple or complex, digital or sensory. After 6 months of a continued struggle, even with an accommodation, a formal assessment would be warranted. Digital and sensory accommodations. Digital accommodations can include educational computer games, text-to-speech on a computer, digital notes, or a recording of a lecture. Sensory accommodations can be simple things such as rocking chairs, a strap on the bottom of a chair in order to release leg strength, a stress ball, Velcro, or weight on the student's legs for students with sensory needs. Next, we will discuss the least restrictive environment, or LRE. Public Law 94-142 and the least restrictive environment. Public Law 94-142 guarantees full and equal opportunity for education for students with disabilities. It also guarantees a free and appropriate public education. However, the problem with this public law was that people were able to decide what was appropriate on their own terms. So, in 1990, there was a reauthorization, which is actually the IDEA, which clears up confusions and creates the least restrictive environment. Parental rights in the law. Parents have many rights when it comes to their child's education. This includes confidential treatment of a child's records, access to all of the child's records, disciplinary and academic, notification of all meetings that have to do with their child's education, assessment requests. Parents basically have the right to be a part of their child's education. Ronker v. Walter in Law 34 CFR 300.116E. The duty to teach in the least restrictive environment was enforced in Ronker v. Walter, which is a Michigan case about non-segregated seating if the support can be provided within a general education setting. Law 34 CFR 300.116E is a more recent law that establishes the bounds that you cannot deprive a student of the least restrictive environments because modifications are needed if the modifications can be met. The Universal Dedication Vision Statement. The Universal Dedication Vision Statement is Michigan's vision statement for recent provisions have aimed to offer all students access to general education curriculum in the least restrictive environments and expectations up to grade level. They also are expected to have access to grade level content expectations and the goals and objectives in their IEP. They also have the right to have a highly qualified special education teacher. This means that they are qualified in specialized instruction and content matter in all grades and levels that they will be teaching. Section 504 mandates education in the least restrictive environment, and if a student is placed away from the general education setting, the classroom must have a likeness to the general education setting in the facilities, equipments, and programs being used. Lastly, we will discuss assessments and planning. First, the multidisciplinary team process. The multidisciplinary team process includes a team of professionals. This team includes the school psychologist, a school administrator, the parent, teacher in both general education and special education if there is Tier 2 education being used, a special education specialist, and a school nurse or a school from the district. This team of professionals performs a formal evaluation on students with a caregiver's permission. The members of the team contribute different pieces of information, including family history, academic history, behavior and learning models, and any medications that may be needed. Larry P. versus Riles, 1979. This case was about an IQ testing bias. It was thought that at this time the IQ testing was both racially and culturally biased. In this court case, it was ruled that when dealing with a minority student, you must take into account other factors such as adaptive behavior, performance, and history. Performance can include things in academic and both at-home performance. Now this is adapted for all students and may use multiple devices in order to gauge the IQ. This also uses the patterns of strengths and weaknesses for adaptive behavior performance. IQ testing. IQ testing must be appropriate to age and culturally and racially unbiased. A very common method is the Wessler series, which have 3 different tests for different age spans and is the most widely used. The Stanford-Binet also covers reasoning and memory. The Kaufman Assessment Battery for Children, 2nd edition, discusses strengths and weaknesses of a child, while the Slowson Intelligent Test Revised is a quick and easy way to gauge IQ with no reading or writing needed. The test of nonverbal intelligence is an IQ test that requires no use of written or spoken language. WISC 4. This Wessler test discusses verbal and performance skills with multiple subsets. This is individually administered and helps to provide educational planning for a student and creates a sort of profile for a student which can include things such as verbal strengths and weaknesses. Academic assessments. Academic assessments can be administered by the general or special education teacher. This is an individual testing which gives quantified data for individual students. Common methods are the Brigance, which quantifies readiness, goals, and skills in mathematics and reading. The Wyatt, which gauges decoding, comprehension, and expression. And the Piaget-R, which has 2 levels for different age spans, engages knowledge, comprehension, decoding, and reasoning skills for mathematics and reading. Observations. Observations are usually to be done by a special education specialist. They usually do 2 to 3 of these observations, with 3 being the optimal choice. This gives information about a student's strengths and weakness, both behaviorally and academically, and helps to create the profile for the disciplinary team process. The observations should be factual, include the lesson that was being taught the day, the responsibility of the child, and the ability of the child to perform the responsibility, the behavior of a child throughout the time spent, the participation and executive functioning of a child, and it should also include a time on task report. Patterns of strengths and weaknesses, and the discrepancy model. Patterns of strengths and weaknesses go as far back as possible and gather as much data as the teacher can possibly gather. This can include assignments, tests, disciplinary, and oral and written reports from past teachers, disciplinaries, or school administrators. This also discussed a pattern of strengths and weaknesses. And a pattern of strengths and weaknesses have certain standards, which is discussed from district to district. In the Gracia Isabella RASD, for example, expects that a score above or equal to 80% in a classroom test score to be a strength and a score of 60% to be a weakness. The discrepancy model is more of a snapshot of a student's performance during an academic assessment. This compares the scores of the IQ of a student and the academic assessment. A discrepancy is thought to show a disability. However, this can be problematic, as a student could simply be a bad test taker, have visual processing issues, or a whole number of things, which could just be as simple as having a bad day. And that is the end of my EDC 250 Learning Disabilities Screencast 2. Thank you.